Okay, sorry. And I hate when I do that because when I go to upload them, it's always so like jarring to me to see that, and I need to quit that. So we're going to jump into our grading, the first thing. And one of the things I'm going to tell you guys is that we are no longer going to be scoring or going over the questions that needed to be uploaded into Google Classroom. Now, and here's why. I'm having some students that are jumping ahead and watching the videos and pretty much just writing down what I'm saying and submitting it. They're not trying to do the work on their own. Not saying any of you guys would do that, just saying. So when you are uploading into Google Classroom, I always give you feedback on your questions, giving you the opportunity to fix those and resubmit them. So in all reality, there's really no reason for us to take this time going over those. So I need to make sure that your work is your work and not just resubmitting what I'm spewing out. So we will go over the questions that were not intended for Google Download. So that will be questions 1 and 2 today. So let me kind of flip over here to get a look at my 1 and 2. Question 1 says, why did Elia feel bad about leaving for America? So on page 36 is where that started. And I would say that Elia feels bad about going to America because it isn't until he's on that ship that he realizes that he had not carried Madame Zeroni up that hill to where she could get a drink from the stream. And so that's when he feels bad. My evidence is on page 36 up into the top of 37. You could have chosen a piece of this, or you could have included all of this as your textual evidence. It wasn't until the ship had cleared the harbor and was heading out across the Atlantic that he suddenly remembered his promise to carry Madame Zeroni up the mountain, and he felt terrible. So that is our evidence that supports that. Why did he feel bad about leaving for America? It's because he hadn't fulfilled his promise. So look at number 2. You only had to choose one of the multiple choice. And I got to lean over here. Why is Stanley surprised that Zero is the first one to finish digging? Why is he so surprised by that? That answer is on page 37, right underneath the Madame Zeroni piece. It says, Zero was the smallest kid in group D, but he was the first one to finish digging. So one of our choices is Zero is the smallest boy in their group. That is the correct response. So your answer would have been C. And our evidence that would back that up, if it had said, explain why or how you know, it would have been on page 37 where it says Zero was the smallest kid in group D. And that's where we're stopping there. 3 and 4, I should have already discussed with you. So we're just going to flip on over and look at my lesson plan for today. Keeping in mind that our end in mind is, I will identify qualities of the main character. We've had quite a few characters that have been introduced so far. His bunkmates, Mr. Sir, Mr. Pendanski, the Mrs. Zeroni, and so there's been quite a few, but our main character is Stanley. So identify qualities of the main character. We could say qualities of Stanley by analyzing his thoughts, words, and feelings. So he is our main character at this point. He's who the story is revolving around. So this is what we're looking for. All right. I need you guys to start thinking about the words because the test is going to be on Friday. So I need you to start practicing those a little bit, choosing 2 or 3 of these, and how would you create a meaningful sentence with those? Because I'm going to tell you right now, I'm altering the test a little bit, and you will be creating meaningful sentences for me. And the rest of the vocabulary test will be maybe using context clues to identify which word is used correctly. It could be a fill in the blank type of scenario. So I need you guys spending a little bit of time with these. Excuse me. Recycle is to use again. Increasingly is more and more. Collapse is to fall down. Retrieved, fetched, humiliating is embarrassing. Despicable is terrible. Staggered is to walk unsteadily. And survive is to stay alive. Those are the words that you're going to be working with. Creating those meaningful sentences. Keeping that rubric always in your mind for a meaningful sentence. You have to use the word correctly. And I was very lenient on holes as far as using that rubric, and I will not be as lenient this time, guys. You have to use the word correctly. And then you have to use at least 2 details for it to be a truly meaningful sentence that would score a 100 in the classroom, or that would allow you to score the full possible points. If you use the word correctly and you only give me 1 detail, then you only get a partial points for that sentence. So let's say if it's worth 10 points and you used it correctly and you gave 2 details, all right, then that's the full 10 points. You use the word correctly and you only gave 1 detail, okay, then that would be like 6.5 points, because each one of these is worth 33.3 points. So it'd be 3.3. If you use the word correctly and gave no details, then you are down to 3 points. So you got to remember that they add up. I need you to really be practicing those this week. All right. So want to take our book, and we're going to pick up on page 41, chapter 8. Give you a minute to get there. Let me see if I've got any water left in my cup. No, I don't. All right, here we go. A lot of people don't believe in curses, and a lot of people don't believe in yellow-spotted lizards either. But if one bites you, it doesn't make a difference whether you believe in it or not. Actually, it is kind of odd that scientists named the lizard after its yellow spots. Each lizard has exactly 11 yellow spots, but the spots are hard to see on its yellow-green body. The lizard is from 6 to 10 inches long and has big red eyes. In truth, its eyes are yellow, and it is the skin around the eyes which is red. But everyone always speaks of its red eyes. It also has black teeth and a milky white tongue. I would not want to be seeing one of these. Looking at one, you would have thought that it should have been named a red-eyed lizard or a black-toothed lizard or perhaps a white-tongued lizard. If you've ever been close enough to see the yellow spots, you are probably dead. The yellow-spotted lizards like to live in holes, which offer shade from the sun and protection from predatory birds. Up to 20 lizards may live in one hole. They have strong, powerful legs and can leap out of very deep holes to attack their prey. They eat small animals, insects, certain cactus thorns, and the shells of sunflower seeds. Chapter 9. Well, Stanley stood in the shower and let the cold water pour over his hot and sore body. It was 4 minutes of heaven. For the second day in a row, he didn't use soap. He was too tired. There was no roof over the shower building, and the walls were raised up 6 inches off the ground, except in the corners. There was no drain in the floor, and the water ran out under the walls and evaporated quickly in the sun. He put on his clean set of orange clothes, and he returned to his tent, put his dirty clothes in his crate, and got out his pen and box of stationery, and headed to the rec room. A sign on the door said rec room, like W-R-E-C-K, like a mess. Nearly everything in the room was broken. The TV, the pinball machine, the furniture. Even the people looked broken, with their worn-out bodies sprawled over the various chairs and sofas. X-Ray and Armpit were playing pool. The surface of the table reminded Stanley of the surface of the lake. It was full of bumps and holes because so many people had carved their initials into the felt. There was a hole in the far wall, and an electric fan had been placed in front of it. Cheap air conditioning, at least the fan worked. As Stanley made his way across the room, he tripped over an outstretched leg. "Hey, watch it," said an orange lump on a chair. "You watch it," muttered Stanley, too tired to care. "What'd you say?" the lump demanded. "Nothing," said Stanley. When the lump rose, he was almost as big as Stanley and a lot tougher. "You said something," and he poked his fat finger in Stanley's neck. "What'd you say?" Well, a crowd quickly formed around them. "Be cool," said X-Ray. He put his hand on Stanley's shoulders. "You don't want to mess with the caveman," he warned. "The caveman's cool," said Armpit. "I'm not looking for trouble," Stanley said. "I'm just tired, that's all." And the lump grunted. Well, X-Ray and Armpit led Stanley over to a couch, and Squid slid over to make room as Stanley sat down. "Did you see the caveman back there?" X-Ray asked. "The caveman's one tough dude," said Squid, and he lightly punched Stanley's arm. But Stanley leaned back against the torn vinyl upholstery. Despite his shower, his body still radiated heat. "I wasn't trying to start anything," he said. The last thing he wanted to do after killing himself all day on the lake was to get in a fight with a boy called the Caveman. He was glad X-Ray and Armpit had come to his rescue. "Well, how'd you like your first hole?" asked Squid. Stanley groaned, and the other boys laughed. "Well, the first hole's the hardest," said Stanley. "No way," said X-Ray. "The second hole's a lot harder. You're hurting before you even get started. If you think you're sore now, just wait and see how you feel tomorrow morning, right?" "That's right," said Squid. "Plus, the fun's gone," said X-Ray. "The fun?" asked Stanley. "Don't lie to me," said X-Ray. "I bet you always wanted to dig a big hole, right? Am I right?" Stanley had never really thought about it before, but he knew better than to tell X-Ray he wasn't right. "Every kid in the world wants to dig a big hole," said X-Ray to China, right? "Right," said Stanley. "See what I mean?" said X-Ray. "That's what I'm saying. But now the fun's gone, and you still got to do it again and again and again." "Camp fun and games," said Stanley. "What's in the box?" asked Squid. Stanley had forgotten he had brought it. Paper. I was going to write a letter to my mother." "Your mother?" laughed Squid. "She'll worry if I don't." And Squid scowled, and Stanley looked around the room. This was the one place in camp where the boys could enjoy themselves. And what'd they do? They wrecked it. A glass on the TV was smashed as if someone had put his foot through it. Every table and chair seemed to be missing at least one leg. Everything leaned. He waited to write the letter until after Squid had gotten up and joined the game of pool. Dear Mom, today was my first day at camp, and I've already made some friends. We've been out on the lake all day, so I'm pretty tired. Once I pass the swimming test, I'll get to learn how to water ski. And he stopped writing because he became aware that somebody was reading over his shoulder. He turned to see Zero standing behind the couch. I don't want her to worry about me, he explained. And Zero said nothing. He just stared at the letter with a serious, almost angry look on his face. Stanley slipped it back into the stationery box. Did the shoes have red X's on the back? Zero asked him. And it took Stanley a moment, but then he realized Zero was asking about Clyde Livingston's shoes. Yeah, they did, he said. And he wondered how Zero knew that. Brand X was a popular brand of sneakers, and maybe Clyde Livingston made a commercial for them. And Zero stared at him for a moment with the same intensity with which he had been staring at the letter. Stanley poked his finger through a hole in the vinyl couch and pulled out some of the stuffing. He wasn't aware of what he was doing. Come on, caveman, dinner, said Armpit. You coming, caveman? Said Squid. And Stanley looked around to see that Armpit and Squid were talking to him. Sure, he said. He put the piece of stationery back in the box and then got up and followed the boys out to the tables. The lump wasn't the caveman. He was caveman. He shrugged his left shoulder. It was better than Barf Bag. All right, so remember, Barf Bag is the boys' place that he took. Now, in class, I would ask you to do this with your shoulder partner or as a team. But based on what I read just today, what is a quality that we can pick out about Stanley? And I'd like you to jot that down in your journal. What is a quality about Stanley? And then what would be your evidence to support it? I'm going to give you about a minute. Oh, excuse me. All right, so we're close to time. So the quality, and keep in mind, you may have chosen a different quality. And if you can support it, I usually give you credit. Doesn't have to be identical to mine. Sorry, I'm moving around a lot, but between my hip is bothering me today. If you can support it, I'm going to give you credit, right? That's how I do. And I would do that in class, and I do that on a test. If it makes sense. It doesn't have to be identical to mine. But the quality, and that's our end in mind, it's asking, identify a quality of the main character, that's Stanley, through his thoughts, words, and feelings. So I'm going to choose his words. And I would say that Stanley is peaceful. And the reason that I would say that is when he trips over the other guy's feet, the guy's poking him in the neck and he's wanting to fight. And even though Stanley's a little bit bigger than the guy and he could probably do the fight, Stanley's like, I'm just tired, I don't want any trouble. And he kind of moves on from that. And so he decides to walk away. This is telling me that he is really a peaceful kind of kid, or he was tired and hot and he could have popped off right back and had a big brawl in the rec room, that would not have been peaceful or a peace-loving kid, So those actions, if he had gone the other way, would have given us a totally different quality. So what I'd like you to do is I'm going to read the questions today, and we're going to break them down. So we've got, what conclusion can you draw about why Stanley waits until he sees the water truck before finishing the last of his water? And use details from the story to support your answer. Number 2, why does Stanley get angry with Mr. Pendanski? And you're going to choose one. Why does he get angry with him? Number 3, what conclusion can you draw about why Stanley would have been glad if the other boys had called him Barf Bag? Use details from the story to support your answer. And last, what is a quality of Stanley's character that you identified from today's reading? Use details from the story to support your answer. So when it says today's reading, it's meaning from pages 48 through 54. Gotta write that down. Wasn't sure how far we'd get today. All right. So we've got time to read just a little bit more. Chapter 10. Well, Stanley had no trouble falling asleep, but morning came much too quickly. Every muscle and joint in his body ached as he tried to get out of bed. He didn't think it was possible, but his body hurt more than it had the day before. It wasn't just his arms and back, but his legs, ankles, and waist also hurt. The only thing that got him out of bed was knowing that every second he wasted meant he was 1 second closer to the rising of the sun, and he hated the sun. He could hardly lift his spoon during breakfast, and then he was out on the lake, his spoon replaced by a shovel. He found a crack in the ground and began his second hole. He stepped on the shovel blade and pushed on the very back of the shaft with the base of his thumb. This hurt less than trying to hold the shaft with his blistered fingers. As he dug, he was careful to dump the dirt far away from the hole. He needed to save the area around the hole for when his hole was much deeper. He didn't know if he'd ever get that far. X-ray was right. The second hole was the hardest. It would take a miracle. As long as the sun wasn't out yet, he removed his cap and used it to help protect his hands. Once the sun rose, he would have to put it back on his head. His neck and forehead had been badly burned the day before. He took it one shovelful at a time and tried not to think of the awesome task that lay ahead of him. After an hour or so, his sore muscles seemed to loosen up a little bit, and he grunted as he tried to stick his shovel into the dirt. His cap slipped out from under his fingers, and the shovel fell free, and he let it lie there. He took a drink from his canteen. He guessed that the water truck should be coming soon, but he didn't finish all the water, just in case he was wrong. He'd learned to wait until he saw the truck before drinking the last drop. The sun wasn't yet up, but its rays arced over the horizon and brought light to the sky. He reached down to pick up his cap, and there next to it, he saw a wide, flat rock. As he put his cap on his head, he continued to look down at the rock, and he picked it up. Why, he thought he could see the shape of a fish fossilized in it. And he rubbed off some dirt, and the outline of the fish became clearer. The sun peeked over the horizon, and he could actually see tiny lines where every one of the fish bones had been. He looked at the barren land all around him. True, everyone referred to this area as the lake, but it was still hard to believe that this dry wasteland was once full of water. Then he remembered what Mr. Sir and Mr. Pedanski had both said. If he dug up anything interesting, he should report it to one of them. If the warden liked it, he would get the rest of the day off. And he looked back down at the fish. He had found his miracle. Well, he continued to dig, though very slowly, as he waited for the water truck. He didn't want to bring attention to his find, afraid that one of the other boys might try to take it from him. He tossed the rock face down beside his dirt pile as if it had no special value. A short while later, he saw the cloud of dirt heading across the lake. The truck stopped and the boys lined up. They always lined up in the same order, Stanley realized. No matter who got there first, X-Ray was always at the front of the line. Then came Armpit, Squid, Zigzag, Magnet, and Zero. Stanley got in line behind Zero. He was glad to be at the back, so no one would notice the fossil. His pants had very large pockets, but the rock still made a bulge. Mr. Pedanski filled each boy's canteen until Stanley was the only one left. "I found something," Stanley said, taking it out of his pocket. And Mr. Pedanski reached for Stanley's canteen, but Stanley handed him the rock instead. "What's this?" "Well, it's a fossil," said Stanley. "Look, it's a fish." But Mr. Pedanski looked at it again. "So, see, you can even see all the little bones," said Stanley. "Well, interesting," said Mr. Pedanski. "Let me have your canteen." Well, Stanley handed it to him, and Mr. Pedanski filled it and then returned it. "So, do I get the rest of the day off?" "What for?" "You know, you said if I found something interesting, the warden would give me the day off." Mr. Pedanski laughed as he gave the fossil back to Stanley. "Sorry, Stanley, the warden isn't interested in fossils." "Well, let me see that," said Magnet, taking the rock from Stanley. And Stanley continued to stare at Mr. Pedanski. "Hey, Zig, dig this rock." "Cool," said Zigzag. Stanley saw his fossil being passed around. "I don't see nothing," said X-Ray. He took off his glasses, wiped them on his dirty clothes, and put them back on. "See, look at the little fishy," said Armpit. Chapter 11. When Stanley returned to his hole, it wasn't fair. Mr. Pedanski had even said his fossil was interesting. He slammed his shovel into the ground and pried up another piece of earth. And after a while, he noticed X-Ray had come by and was watching him dig. "Hey, caveman, let me talk to you a second," X-Ray said. But Stanley put down his shovel and stepped up out of his hole. "Say, listen," said X-Ray. "If you find something else, give it to me, okay?" Stanley wasn't sure what to say. X-Ray was clearly the leader of the group, and Stanley didn't want to get on his bad side. "You're new here, right?" said X-Ray. "I've been here for almost a year. I've never found anything. You know, my eyesight's not that good. No one knows this, but you know why my name's X-Ray?" Stanley shrugged one shoulder. "It's Pig Latin for Rex. That's all. I'm too blind to find anything." And Stanley tried to remember how Pig Latin worked. X-Ray went on. "Why should you get a day off when you've only been here a couple of days?"